movie End of the Tour and like.
Okay, was that the one that had shoot, what's his name?
Jason Segel.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I was going to say Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
On the theme of not reading the book is an interesting anecdote. When he was preparing for the role of playing David Foster Wallace, he went to a bookstore and bought Infinite Jest. And the clerk, a female, said, "This book has been on the nightstand of every guy I've dated, unread. There's an unread copy on every nightstand."
That sounds about right.
That's pretty funny.
Thanks. And right now, Kristen's like going, "Oh, great! He's just like every other guy."
There's something you could do to change that.
I know. Well, I've read 50 pages.
Yeah. 50 pages.
Yeah.
So let's bring it back to The Good Place a little bit here, though, because you've watched the show. You're current on the show, right? Mm-hmm. Have you been able to see the influence that Wallace's writing has had on Shore?
Like what I said earlier about the mixture of just like the type of humor, because there's like lowbrow humor, highbrow humor at the same time, and those are like as intelligent as he seems. Like he will drop in a lowbrow joke, Wallace will, and same with The Good Place. There'll be philosophy jokes, which are not going to play to everybody, but then there'll be really lowbrow jokes, like with Jason.
Oh yeah,
and it's like he revels in that kind of stuff.
I'm right here, bud.
So I mean, with the humor, I mean, it's like satirical. Mm-hmm. Like it's so over. Like things in Wallace's writing are like so over the top satire that they become profound in the way that I think Michael Schur's the themes in The Good Place also do. And I would say The Good Place more than the other shows, I think, because of what the issues they're dealing with. Right.
Well, it's his most overtly philosophical too.
So, and this isn't a huge spoiler, but one of the themes in season 3 is how hard it is to be a good person in society.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that is basically what Infinite Jest is about. Like, you are meeting people at the maybe lowest point in their lives, a lot of these people, and this is how they deal with it, and how they get along, how they just get through the day. You know what I mean? And then the same thing with The Good Place. You're looking at people who are passed into the afterlife and are still trying to make the best of it, right, in the afterlife. So yeah, I think that's a huge connection that I see.
Does he talk about philosophy a lot, like in Infinite Jest?
Not overtly. I think there's.
It almost reads like philosophy, though. Even the little bit that I've read, it's there's a lot of commentary on things, and it's obviously it's fiction, but in the philosophy I've read, there's to me there is some sort of it's pretty clear to me in the little bit that I've read that Wallace has read some philosophy, and
he's read everything. I swear to God, I don't know. There's nothing he hasn't read.
But all right, so I do fully plan to read it, and I would want to read it and actually then rewatch the show. So that might actually be as I'm watching the 4th season.
Oh, maybe
go ahead and read the book.
Maybe we don't end this sucker after so many episodes. Maybe we do it again.
You know what? I'm actually not opposed to that. I think it's worth revisiting, especially if we revisit it in the context of some of the things that we've talked about.
Sequel.
I forget the podcast, but there's a podcast that watches the same bad movie like every week, and it just gets more absurd. I've only heard of it. I can't remember the name, but it sounds like maybe like Cannonball Run 2, like a movie of that level.
Oh, yes.
Just like how on your 5th time you've watched it, like what more meaning can you glean out of this absurd movie?
It's amazing. Like James Bonding is like my go-to podcast.
We've talked about this.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that podcast many times.
Yeah, it's pretty much like the model for this podcast, but it's much smarter.
Lovers, not experts.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's much smarter and fun. Our podcast is smarter and funnier than that show. And they have professionals.
Jason, we're good fork buddies, but I would argue that Matt's Myra and Gorley are better at podcasting possibly than we are.
Well, I mean, let's not split hairs here. But anyway,
I'm going to give you guys some homework, and this is way easier than reading a 1,000-page novel.
Okay, all right.
There's a 20-minute commencement address, Kenyon College, 2008 commencement address from David Foster Wallace.
Is that the Consider the Lobster?
It's called This Is Water.
Oh, that's
about 20 minutes. That used to be like my daily affirmation thing. I don't know how many times I've listened to that speech. It gets me every time.
They published that on its own.
There is a slim volume of that speech. But it's on YouTube. You can watch it. This is Water is what you want to look up. If you want to get just the top level taste, and like basically his whole philosophy congealed into 20 minutes. And if you want to watch a grown man cry, you can watch me watch that video. It still does it.
What are you doing right now?
You can watch after this. We could totally turn that on, and I'll have a good cry.
So we could do that.
I do have a nice monitor here.
And after we're done with that, we can watch the last 20 minutes of Jerry Maguire.
All right, so
And
if
you
we're
can
going to
see
just
another
start
grown man
watching
cry.
things
I've already
that-
used my veto, so
You did, and it failed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Does that count? We might give you your veto back. I might give you your veto back and second it. I don't dislike Jerry Maguire, by the way.
And just so you know, like the as I've said many times, the part that gets me is not when Tom Cruise walks into the room with the group of divorced women and says, "You complete me."
Yeah.
No, the part when I lose it is when Cuba Gooding Jr. loses the rather large chip on his shoulder and dances around in the end zone, only to then hug Jerry Maguire when he's walking to the locker room.
Speaking of Glenn Fry is
Yes,
in
he
Jerry
is.
Maguire.
full circle. End of episode.
See what we did there?
Put a button on that.
Yep.
Well, this conversation has made me want to read that book more than I did when Jason started the group. So
Yeah, well then I think and as much so well if Chris hadn't told me that the venue was in danger of not being there, I probably would have never have canceled it, and I mean it would have failed.
we can try again. And
it would have failed anyway because
You know what? If we
I'm
don't-
really busy now.
if we don't even put a book group thing on it, I'm more likely to read it than if we put a book group on it.
Can I advocate for something? This is totally crazy, but I
Sure.
have been reading this. I'm currently in the middle of that reread that you started. I kept going. I've read it entirely on my iPhone, which is a really easy way to fit it into your life.
Okay.
No kidding.
It's insane. 1,000-page book on your iPhone, but it's easy to look up things you don't understand. It's easy to go to the footnotes on the iPhone.
Wow.
If I'm sitting and waiting in a waiting room for 10 minutes at the doctor, or, if I think I want to be in the bathroom for a long time, 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Most of the chapters are short.
Now,
Just
okay,
saying.
I got it. This was the one time where I was tempted to set up an Audible account and get the audiobook version.
Is there an audio book?
Yeah,
I was
there is.
curious.
I have not listened to it.
Who
Is there an
narrates it?
unabridged audio book?
It's not a famous person.
Okay.
Okay.
But it is. There is a version. I would really recommend reading it with your eyeballs the first time.
You know what? I've actually never listened to an audiobook.
Oh, well, you should.
I'm making that confession here now. I have always thought it was better to read the book because as I get into the book, especially if a book is good, then I have the voices in my head, and I don't like that having that influenced by someone else reading it.
I've listened to 2 audiobooks, so I'm 2 up on you.
Okay.
The first one I've listened to is Lincoln in the Bardo.
Oh, the George Saunders?
Which I've heard is really good with all the voice actors.
Yeah, that's...
I have a copy of that sitting on my shelf that is to be read.
Yeah. Well, I
recommend that one after you read Infinite Jest.
Well, I read that book in 3 days.
Saunders is great, by the way.
Yes.
Civil War Land and Bad Decline. I've read a couple of his short story collections.
I
Very
started
good.
reading 10th of December a while back, and I really enjoyed it. Speaking of which, David Sedaris would also be one of my literary tastes. Going back to your first question.
See, we were like very similar on the same level, so this is why I think you're going to like this book.
We're like twinsies, man.
Pretty close, except for the Friends and stuff, which I'm not saying I'm not going to read. I just haven't.
No, and like Friends and it's I at least with Friends, and I think I would probably even reread him again after I read Infinite Jest just to see how much Wallace has influenced him.
I'm astounded that you've reread this book so many times because I there are a handful of books that I've read more than once, and they were all prior to my 30s.
Well, can I correct you? I've only read it chronologically, like page 1 to page whatever, one time.
Okay, so you've just revisited it multiple times.
and also been to the conference like 3 times and listened to people discuss it for hours ad nauseum.
Okay,
And now I'm actually This is my second reread attempt. I stalled
Complete
out one time before.
Chronological reread.
But
Wow.
it really it is sort of like in the title it says infinite. Like it just gets more interesting every time you reread it because there's information that is dropped in early that means a lot that you don't understand until later, and it's just like it's meant to be the very premise. And I'm going to shut up about this in a minute. The very premise of the little plot that you can say that there is of a movie that is so entertaining that once you start watching it, you can't stop. And then it becomes weaponized. And like the overt, like the A plot is the plot to get this thing and control it. And then, but that there's a whole other spokes off of that plot that are just really about very human stories. But the thing is the plot of the book sort of mirrors the idea of you want to keep, once you finish, you just want to go back and start it again. And it's also kind of necessary too.
So I'm kind of curious just because of the way that you refer to it as like your Bible, and you carry around like a Mormon missionary carries his copy of the Book of Mormon.
Way to Mormon it up, Jason.
Can't help how I was raised, man. But like, do you and just like how you meet for a conference every year, like is there like a cult of Wallace?
I wouldn't say there's a cult.
I don't know. I mean,
the C word is a difficult one, but
yeah, I don't mean to say it
cult
like
is problematic.
I'm not trying to say that anyone who reads this book immediately becomes like a Scientologist or something, but but it does. But you do seem to.
Do you feel like going clear after reading it?
Oh God!
I think I have an easy answer for what you're going to ask.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you read this book, you're not indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking, other than it is the best thing to be is empathetic toward other people.
Okay.
Huh.
And I think that is the most important thing. And I think that's a thing that Michael Schur, the main thing he gleans from this book.
That is a huge part of The Good Place is the empathy of it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think that is like a huge thing that is missing from society right now.
Yes.
Empathy. Empathy is in short supply.
Yes.
So I think reading this book makes you a better person. It's not going to get you into heaven. It's not going to get you Good Place points. I think it's just going to make you a better, more understanding person of other people and what they are going through.
Interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. You got anything else, bud?
That's all I have for Chris.
I thank you, Chris, for doing this in general.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
I want to do this for a while.
Thanks for spending your Saturday night here with us.
People don't need to know when we record this. I don't know. Whatever. I don't care. But yeah, no, thank you. Honestly, talking to you, I have sort of talked to people about this book for probably like nearly 20 years, and this is the conversation that's actually made me most interested in committing to it and reading it. So for that,
so
I'm
you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance. Exactly.
Oh, so I've heard Short owns the rights.
Oh, to make the film?
Yeah, he bought the rights to the film. I think he intended to produce something, but when they say a book is unfilmable, I've watched films or things that were supposedly unfilmable, like say Trainspotting, for instance, and they made a good film out of it.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think it's possible to make this a film, and I think that's a strength of it.
Because everything in most of Trainspotting is not in the film. The book.
A lot of it isn't.
Yeah, a lot of it is not.
Yeah.
And those are the most enjoyable parts of the book, I find.
Yeah. And
the parts that are not in the movie?
The parts that are not in the movie are the most enjoyable parts.
So is that why you're able to enjoy the movie separately from the book?
Yes.
Okay.
It's definitely one of those. There are a few instances where I think the book and the movie are maybe on equal level, and Trainspotting is one of those because there are a lot of short stories in Trainspotting that don't make it into the movie, that just give it so much life and character.
And you could kind of do that with this book. There are things you could get rid of that are not plot centric, but I think that you leave so much out. Like the joy in reading this book is like when you turn the page, it's going to be a whole thing you didn't expect. Like it's not going to the story, the plot line is not going to continue from the last word you read. It's going to be a whole new thing for you to discover and revel in. And that's where the way I could keep returning to it and reading individual sections and be satisfied by that. I think if you tried to adapt this, And I hope it does not happen. In the same way that like Lincoln and the Bardo probably would not make a great film.
Yeah.
I don't think you could do it.
Well,
but